All right, so I watched a video that mentioned that space is the next frontier, right? They considered it to the next what is going to be the impetus for the next golden age, right? The next big burst in wealth, right? It's the next great source of wealth and advancement. And I'm going to preface this by saying I don't know for sure, but I'm pretty confident that that's wrong. Why do I think that is wrong? Because a lot of people compare, I won't say a lot of people, but this video compared this to, the akin to colonizing America or something along those lines, right? Like what led up to the great industrial revolution and the great burst in productivity and all of these resources that were gained from this colonization, right? And so there's a whole thing with colonization, and it really wasn't a good thing for the people that were colonized, right? And that's a whole thing. But this generated a lot of wealth at the cost of the labor force, right? And the indigenous people. At their cost, a lot of wealth was generated, right? And they're saying that going to space will lead to similar levels of prosperity and wealth generation and productivity, right? And this was their claim in their video. And my argument is, how? I'm going to read through my post-it notes here because I wrote a bunch of things down, but they may not all necessarily follow linearly, so we'll see how it goes. But the move to space is not the next gold mine for progress. I put it that in quotations. This new colonization period will be more costly than beneficial. The Americas and such was teeming with just about every resource. That's why it was so profitable. Space is duly lacking in just about every resource. So my argument with this is that, is there things that we can harvest in space? Sure. However, the cost to do such things, at least in our current technology, far exceeds any profit. The profit margin is negative on anything related to space, especially right now. I don't think, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think we have the technology. A rocket just exploded trying to take off, right? Right. So if we can't even get off the planet consistently and effectively and efficiently, what makes you think that we're ready to do anything in space on a scalable and profitable and effective manner or fashion, right? Like, what makes you think we're ready for that, right? If just getting off the planet is so difficult, what makes you think anything else is going to be easier, right? What makes you think that that is the only bar to entry on this whole endeavor, right? And what makes you think that it's worth it? Because yeah, you get out into space, and then what? And then what's there? There's nothing there. That's the whole point. It's a vacuum, right? There's not a whole lot going on in space, right? And you can go to the moon, and are there resources we can harvest on the moon? Sure. However, I ask you this, before we even think about the profitability, do we even want to do that, right? Because what are the potential repercussions of doing that? If we strip mine the moon, what will that do? Right? What kind of imbalances are we going to throw off by doing that? We don't know. We have no idea. We can theorize, we can put some predictions in place, but the answer is we don't know. And if we don't know, I would argue that's a great reason to not find out, right? Because in our greed for just money, I don't, what do we need it for? I don't know. I don't know what we need all of this money for. Right? More super yachts, right? We need luxury space yachts now. That's why we need to go strip mine the moon so we can build space yachts. Everyone gets their own personal who cares about private islands? Get your own private space station, right? Like, what do we need this for? And so I'm going to pause it real quick and change out the battery. Right, so like, why do we even need all of this money? That's a whole nother thing, right? Productivity has to keep going up because it has to. Because if it goes down, we all lose our money. And then no one has money anymore. But you know what happens when no one has money? Everyone still has the same amount of money, in theory, right? But of course, that's not how it'll work out. Some people will somehow end up extremely wealthy even though everyone else has nothing. That's just how it goes. And so, anyway, basically what I'm saying is that, so there was a lot of, it wasn't just like, oh, we're going to get, I think there's like a lot of helium-3 or something on the moon. And there's also probably a bunch of other metals that we can get from the moon, right? Mining asteroids, according to videos that I've watched, is really not as feasible as once thought. It'd be more like scooping asteroids rather than mining them because they're not really solid objects. They're actually more just like clusters held together by gravity and not much else. And so trying to land on them just results in mass ejection of mass. And so, you know, how feasible that is, I don't know. I mean, for like we've had like missions that have been planned or, you know, decided to just try and get samples back to Earth. We're not talking tons. We're not talking large loads of, like, if it was easy to do, don't you think we would try and get as much as possible? The answer is it's very difficult. And so just to try and get a sample of an asteroid or a sample of anything is quite the endeavor. Right? To collect it and then bring it all the way back home, it is extremely expensive and difficult to do this, right? So asteroids probably out of the question for a while, right? There's not a whole lot for us to get on the moon, and bringing it back to Earth again would be difficult. And again, why do we even need to do that? And should we even do that? Is a whole nother thing, right? And so, there's really nothing there on the moon. So if anything we want on the moon, we have to build and, you know, cultivate there. But we can't even do that effectively and efficiently and cohesively on the planet where, like, literally life abounds, right? Yeah, that's my next point here. We are not ready to colonize the moon or Mars. We can't even properly manage our own planet that is built for sustaining life, right? Like, Earth is literally teeming with life, and we are struggling to manage it properly. Imagine how difficult it will be to manage life on a planet that is actively trying to prevent it, right? What makes you think that we can handle literal hell for life, right? Life isn't on the moon to our understanding. I'm not going to say it definitely isn't. You know, potentially there's life finds a way, as they say, right? So I'm not going to completely rule it out. However, there's a reason why the moon appears lifeless, and there's a reason why Mars appears lifeless. It's because it is very against life. The conditions there are very against life, right? And so if we can't cultivate prosperity on the earth, right? What makes you think we can cultivate prosperity anywhere else? And if we can manage to cultivate prosperity on the moon or Mars, why wouldn't we just do it here first? Right? Because doing it here, if we can do it on the moon, it would cost billions, trillions of dollars probably more to do it anywhere else. And that would negate any profits, right? However, it would, if you took all of that resources that you're putting into, you know, doing that, you can reinvest that in the earth itself and have abundance and profit, and prosperity, right? For everyone. And if everyone is, prosperous and all that, then that will make everything a lot easier for you to move forward, right? And so, it doesn't make sense, because if you think about it, okay, well, we're not going for the resources, we're going to colonize it, right? Okay, where's the profit in that, right? Who's paying to go live on the moon where there's nothing, right? Millionaires and billionaires and all that, like there's no profit there, right? You're you're trying to sell me on a company, and you're saying that you're going to have a ton of buyers, but your list of buyers is you, yourself, and your family, right? It's like, okay, so you're going to make money by buying your own product. That doesn't make any freaking sense. I'm sure on paper, it's profit out the wazoo, but in reality, it's not, right? And so, I just like, there's nothing to be gained from this. If you take a step back and look at it, there's basically nothing to be gained from this. And so, let's see what this next thing is. Colonization, in order to be done properly, needs sufficient planning, coordination, and strategy laid out for the future, right? So this is not something that we just say, oh, we're going to the moon now and we're going to build a moon base. You don't plan out just a moon base. You need to plan out 10 steps ahead of this moon base, right? What is this moon base going to become? What are we going to, what happens when it expands? Is there room for expansion? Do we have the resources for expansion? How are we going to provide those resources? How are we going to develop the processes to expand on those resources? Are we going to, delineate locations for certain things? Are they going to, every single part of this needs to be planned out from the beginning before you even start, in order for it to last, in order for it to be effective, right? Because if you just say, we're going to build a moon base because that's what's in that's what gets you, gets attention and stuff, that's great. But if that moon base is rusting away in 30 years, that's just freaking stupid. And so if you're going to invest all of these resources into developing something so insanely and idiotically expensive for seemingly no reason, you better make it at least last and be useful for generations to come. Because if you're not planning for generations to come, then what are you even planning for? Right? What are you even doing? It's just silly. It's just absolutely silly. Just kind of wing it will result in untold needless death, if not right away, then in the future. Look how colonization went with places on Earth in the past, right? So was there a lot of planning put in place for a lot of colonies? No. Some of the first colonies in America failed and had to either just straight up died or had to return home, right? There was very little planning and resources and things put in place for them. And so they would go to these places and die of sickness or just the weather and conditions and things there. And they were not ready for it, right? There was very little planning in place. It was very much go, here's some resources, figure it out, right? And it took a long time before these things developed into anything. And honestly, in some cases, they just would have potentially never taken off if it weren't for the help of the indigenous people, which got screwed over in the end. So it's it's just a really, it's a really concerning thing, because if you're not planning for generations to come, that means you're anticipating that in a few generations, those people will suffer, right? Because if you don't put the proper planning in place and the proper systems in place and the proper, actions in place, right? If that's not all thought out and not really considered, then whatever you build is going to cause significant problems for the future, right? And this is the same thing with happened with industrialization and the building of slums, right? They literally lived in filth and I'm not supposed to say I'm not supposed to say curse words. But they literally did live in literal poop, because things would flood and all the poop in the sewers and things along those lines would come up into the streets. And when there's not proper planning in place, things suffer. And there are civilizations from back over 4,000 years ago plus, right? In the Bronze Age, the Harappan people, right? They had some very well planned out and planned cities that were designed so that as things expanded, they could still sustain those people. And that's something that they learned to do. They didn't just decide to do that. That is learned through experience. And they figured out that, hey, if we're going to build a city and put all this energy into building a city, we better make sure that it is going to be able to be a city in the future, right? Because if overpopulation deteriorates the population, that's a problem, right? That's a problem, right? That's not that's the peasants' problem. That is everyone's problem. And if you see it as that's for the peasants to deal with, you are a terrible person. There's no other way to look at that. Thinking in that mindset, you're just a terrible person. So anyway, basically, not only is it not profitable, but it's potentially just downright demonic in its current goals and ideas and desires. And it's just so foolish, the amount of resources that are being wasted on this seeming next step in human civilization, but we're on the first rung of the ladder and we're trying to reach the 20th. It doesn't make any sense. You're not reaching that rung. You're you can try and jump for it, but you're just gonna fall right off, right? You're not you're not getting it. And so we cannot afford to turn the moon or Mars into a war zone, right? So as I said, if you're not planning for the future, right, you're setting these generations to come up for failure, right? And when resources and conditions degrade, people get desperate, and this will turn what is supposed to be the salvation of humanity, the next hope for humanity, another outpost in the world, so that in case the world dies, right, we at least still have humanity live on, right? But if conditions degrade, or if we make resources scarce, or if we have all this competition going on with a space race and a colonization race and all these things, right, and we're just having these measuring contests, then we're just going to make things 10 times worse everywhere for everyone than they already are. So it's just absolutely stupid. And so closing remarks here, y'all need to grow the F up and get your poop together. Trying to keep it somewhat PG here, because this honestly makes me mad, because the more I think about the idea of space travel and colonization and all these things, the less and less it adds up and makes any it doesn't. There's no logic. There's no logic to it. And I have a talk that I recorded, so I'll probably cover it there. But just a brief mention, I don't even know if it's responsible for us, because I mentioned what happens if we strip mine the moon. Do we even know? And the answer is no. What happens when we normalize space travel? Do we know what the repercussions of that are going to be, right? Are all of these spaceships and cargo ships and all these things, resources coming and going from Earth, are all these exiting of Earth's orbit, all of these trips and all these things that we're doing, right? Like I'm just trying to cover this from as many angles as possible. All of this coming and going, right? Is that responsible? Do we know what the impacts are going to be of that in the long run, right? Because in the short term, yeah, it's negligible. We don't need to worry about it. But when does that become non-negligible? Do we know? Has anyone even thought about it? Because that is something that even makes me even more concerned. Not only is this extremely foolish and expensive and wasteful, but it may be downright idiotic and self-destructive. And no one seems to care, right? We're trying as hard as possible to throw us over a wall, and we don't even know what's on the other side, right? That seems pretty stupid to me, right? And so I really think we should consider that a whole lot more before we go any farther with anything. And I know that that's not going to happen because who cares about generations from now? I want my money. I want my money so bad. I'll do anything for my money. Like, it's so stupid. You know, like what are we doing? Do we even know? And I think the answer is we don't. We really don't. We really don't know what we're doing. And, you know, sometimes I think if you don't know what you're doing, if you're not sure what's going on, it doesn't hurt to take a time out, you know, and take a step back, address the situation, realize your surroundings, and think about, does this make sense? Is this a good idea? And the answer, I'm pretty confident, is going to be no. And so, if someone can enlighten me as to why this is just the most genius and most profitable thing in the world, you know, let me know. But I really don't think that going to space is going to save humanity from itself, right? So that's just my take on it. So yeah. Peace out.